obviously I love talking to people and helping people, trying to understand them, their lives. I think it's a very special thing when you can talk with somebody and they trust you and you can try and help them figure out what's going on with them. Really the goal of this process really help them understand themselves better, understand the world around them and how those two things interact. So that was one of the main reasons. I would say my best advice to somebody who's a psychology major is if you can take a few science classes too. I know depending on which university you go to, it's either psychology is a BA or it can be a BS. And some universities actually, I think you can do either one. You can get a BA in psychology or a BS in psychology. I think that you'll have, if the goal is to go on further in schooling in terms of graduate school, I think it looks a little bit stronger to take a BS because it's more science and math based. So taking things like biology, if there's any type of neuropsych class offered at undergrad level, that would really help. Very interesting class too, by the way. Well, that's a big question. I'm the director of the counseling center here, so a big part of my job responsibilities is actually running the center, doing a lot of the administrative work, working with a lot of different departments on campus, making sure things run smoothly here as much as I can, and working with my staff here. I'm also a clinical psychologist, so I do clinical work here too. I see around 20 students a week in therapy and counseling. So that's another big part of what I do here. I'm also the main go-to person who does the substance abuse and alcohol evaluations. So when a person on campus is having a little trouble or gets into trouble for drinking or smoking marijuana or something like that, it reaches a point where if somebody's concerned about it, they'll often get referred to me, and I'll do a couple session evaluation, just basically to kind of help them figure out if it is a big problem in their life and if more treatment is recommended, and if we need to refer them to a facility outside of here. And then probably the last real big piece of what I do is outreach. Prior to becoming the director, I was the outreach coordinator, and I sort of carried a lot of those duties with me into the director position. Obviously, we look for their educational background to see what other things we would look at is their experience, how much experience they have working in a setting like this. Well, there are many, many positives, and many positives, obviously, number one is being able to help people. When you can sit down and talk with somebody and help them work through a particular issue in their life, help them kind of walk through a time in their life that might be a particularly difficult time in their life, or learn to deal with things or cope with things in healthier ways, and you actually see the change in the person and see them happier when they leave your office. There's no greater feeling than that. It really feels good to be able to be there with somebody to help them. I think it's a very special thing that people are trusting you with some very vulnerable and private information. The negatives, with any career, I think there are negatives. I think with this particular profession, you have to be careful. It can be a high burnout profession. Any type of helping professions can be, I think. You have to be real careful to, we have to be very empathic and care about our clients, but there also has to be a safe line that you draw where you don't take it too much home with you, because that can really affect your personal life. As you can imagine, we deal with some very emotional, very heavy issues at times, and psychologists have to be very good at taking care of themselves first, because if they aren't, they're not going to be able to help any of their clients. I guess there's many different ways you can go about it. You can become a clinical psychologist like I am. There's also counseling psychology, which I think is very similar. It's also, you can get like a PhD in counseling psychology and you'd be just fine doing this type of job. Obviously there's some difference, but there's a lot of overlap between those two, especially when you're working in a college campus at a counseling center. In terms of other occupations, if you didn't, if you didn't want to go through the real long route of getting the doctorate, you can get a master's in counseling, a master's in psychology, a master's in social work. There's a lot of differences between those, but there's also a lot of overlap. I guess if we're talking about somebody who is at undergraduate level, the advice I would give is, one, take some psychology courses, make sure you like the stuff. Like I said before, I think if you're about to venture on a long journey of getting a doctorate or master's or something like that, where you're going to graduate school, make sure it's something that you're passionate about and it is something you want to do. It's tough because it's a bit like teaching, in the sense that teachers have a very difficult setup where they don't actually teach until the end of their career in college and undergrad. And what happens if you get to that point and you're doing student teaching and you get teaching? That's kind of a rough position for them to be in, and it does happen to some students. I think in some ways it's a little bit like that in psychology, because it's not like as an undergrad you can go do therapy with somebody and see if you really like it. The good news is there's more to psychology than just therapy, a lot more. But I think a good piece of advice would be to shadow somebody. Like, obviously you can't come and sit in when I'm having a session with somebody, but you could come and do exactly what you're doing, interview somebody, talk about what they do, and a couple different people, not just somebody who does clinical work, but maybe somebody who is a developmental psychologist who does research, or an experimental psychologist, or cognitive psychologist. There's so many different ways of working in psychology. You know, it depends on where you're working. You know, here we use some technology, not a whole lot. We do use a scheduling software program that makes life a lot easier for us in terms of scheduling our appointments and putting people in a database that's obviously a very encrypted, secure database, but it helps us keep our schedule so much more organized. And then at the end of the year, when we want to tally numbers and how many people we saw, how much outreach we did, how many alcohol screenings, how many depression screenings, things like that, we just have to pull up reports and numbers right in that program. So for us, that's really helpful. I think more and more technology is becoming utilized quite a bit. I mean, in terms of online, I can refer clients to relaxation kind of audio recordings that are online, progressive muscle relaxation, breathing exercises that are all housed online now, so that we can go through it, but also when they leave the session with me, they can go on their computer and they can look up a website that I've given them to and actually practice what we've been doing. So there are a few. In terms of for psychology students, if you're interested in going to psychology, Psychi is the best one. It's the Honor Society for Psychology, and there is one on campus here because I have regular contact with them, because they send volunteers that help us out at our screenings, which is another thing you can do as an undergrad. You can, if there's volunteer opportunities to work with alongside psychologists at screenings and other workshops and events, that's a great thing to put on your resume. So for when you're going to apply to graduate school, that sets you apart from some of the other students.